In this session, we'll begin the layout of the front and top views of the V-block. We'll start by choosing the Use a Template option and then select the template file ACAD A Title. After making sure that the Construction Lines layer has been set as the current layer, we'll turn on the Object Snap Tracking, Line Weight Tracking, and Model buttons in the status bar area. The first object that we'll create is a rectangle. After selecting the rectangle icon, we'll click the left mouse button to define the lower left corner of the rectangle and then key in at 3,2.5 to define the opposite corner. We'll now make a copy of the rectangle. First, we'll click on one of its edges and then right-click the mouse and select the option Copy Selection. We'll now click on the lower right corner of the rectangle in order to define the base point and then key in at 0,0.75 to define the amount of displacement between the original rectangle and the copy. The next step is to rotate our new rectangle. We'll start this process by first left-clicking on the rectangle in order to pre-select it. Then we'll right-click the mouse and select the Rotate option. Now we'll click on the lower right corner of the selected rectangle to define the point about which rotation will occur, and then key in 30 for the rotation angle. We'll now begin to draw the top view of the V-block. After selecting the rectangle icon, we'll now locate the crosshairs over the corner of the front view in order to activate the Object Track Alignment feature. Now we'll position the crosshairs about 1.5 inches above the corner and then left-click the mouse, followed by keying in at 3,2 in order to define the other corner of the rectangle. We'll now select the rectangle that we have just created and then click on the Explode icon in order to divide the rectangle into 4 separate line segments. Our next step is to create 2 additional lines toward the center of the rectangle by using the Offset command with an offset distance of 0.2. We'll now repeat the Offset command in order to create 2 more lines that are located 0.75 inches from the top and bottom lines. At this point, we'll now use the Layer control box to change the current layer to Object Lines. Now we'll select the line icon in the drawing toolbar and then draw the 3 lines as shown here in the front view. We'll now turn on the Polar button in the status bar area and then move the crosshairs near the left vertical line shown here. As you can see, the polar intersection marker is displayed, so we'll left-click in order to create the next line. Our last step is to right-click the mouse and select the Close option. In this session, we'll begin by setting up the auxiliary view. We'll start by pre-selecting the objects in the top view as shown here. Now we'll right-click the mouse and then left-click on the option Copy Selection. To define the base point, we'll click on the lower left corner of the top view. Now we'll make sure that the corner point of the copy is aligned with the inclined line in the front view by dragging the crosshairs over the inclined line and then click the left mouse button in order to place the copy. We now need to rotate the copy that we just placed. We'll start by pre-selecting all of the lines and then right-click the mouse in order to bring up the pop-up menu shown here. We'll select the Rotate option and then select the lower left corner of the collection of selected lines in order to define the base point about which rotation will occur. Now we'll key in -60 for the angle of rotation. Our next step is to create the V-cut in the auxiliary view. We'll start this process by selecting the line icon and then draw a line between the 2 points shown here. We'll now click the right mouse button and then select the Enter option to end the line command. After pre-selecting the line that we just created, we'll now right-click the mouse and select the Rotate option. Now we'll select the top right end of the line as the base point of rotation and then key in an angle of 45 degrees. We'll now create another line that is 45 degrees from the inclined angle by using a similar set of steps. Now we'll use the trim command to transform the two lines that we just created into a V shape. In this session, we'll complete the auxiliary view as well as the top and front view. We'll start by clicking on the layer control box and then changing the current layer to be the hidden lines layer. Now, after selecting the line icon, we'll click on the vertex of the V-cut to define the first endpoint of the line. We'll now hold down the Shift key and click the right mouse button, and then select the option Perpendicular in the pop-up window. Now we'll move the crosshairs next to the inclined line in the front view until we see the word Perpendicular appear as shown here, and then left-click the mouse to define the other endpoint of the line. Now we'll extend the line that connects the auxiliary view and the front view. After ending the line command, we'll now change the current layer to be the construction line layer. And now we'll create the two vertical construction lines shown here. And then we'll switch the current view to be the object lines layer and draw the lines in the top view shown here. The next step is to set a polar tracking option. We'll do this by clicking the right mouse button while the cursor is located on the polar button and then selecting the settings option. We'll now set the increment angle to 120 and then click the OK button. Now we'll use the Zoom Real-Time icon along with the Pan icon in order to enlarge the display of the top view as shown here. We'll now draw a line whose first endpoint coincides with the end of the horizontal line as shown here. And the other endpoint is controlled by the polar increment angle setting, as we can see here. The next step is to create the other inclined line in the top view by repeating the previous steps with a polar increment angle setting of -120 degrees. We'll now add the other object lines in the top view as shown here. In order to transfer the position at the end of the 30-degree inclined lines down to the front view, we'll add a vertical construction line. And then draw an object line along this construction line in the front view. The final steps involve first creating construction lines that transfer positions from the front view up to the auxiliary view, and then adding the necessary object lines to the auxiliary view.